Good morning, America. That's the first time I ever said that. Good morning, and welcome back to the Union Podcast. Keri, we are at episode 10. Episode 10.
Can you believe it? It's been quite a summer.
No, can I believe it? When we first talked about doing this, I just knew we were gonna kill it. So 10, not a surprise, but because we have a special guest today, it's even more special to help celebrate our anniversary. And so I just want to welcome all our viewers here from Facebook, from LinkedIn, from Twitter, from TikTok to the Union Podcast. We are your weekly dose of news, policy, politics, research, polling, and advocacy in K-12 education, particularly from the perspective of educators and parents. And so you all know the heart I have for our educators, particularly our male educators, and you know the tremendous work that Keri does for parents around the country with the National Parent Union. So Keri, you have a special guest today. You all wrote an amazing op-ed. Let's jump right into our special guest and what you all wrote about in your op-ed.
Yeah, I want to introduce my beautiful friend who I'm gonna give you his fancy title, but I want you to first know him as a beautiful human being, because that's how I know him, and a man who is devoted to the work and putting good into the world. But he's also the CEO of Urban Assembly, which is a network of public schools in New York City. We had to drag him away from the babies this morning to say, will you please talk to us for a few minutes? But I promise you it's going to be worth your while, because we want to make sure that the message that you and I were really anxious to make sure we put out into the world, really getting all of us focused back on this critical moment for our children. And frankly, how politics and a lot of the choices that we are making right now, it's doing tremendous harm to the children. And you see it every single day, because you see these babies like literally in your buildings, like you're talking to them. I see it every single day, like not only talking to parents across the country, but in my own children. The impact is so real, David. And that's why I thought it was really important in this moment that you and I come together and we have this moment to maybe get people to get their heads on straight a little bit about how we are really doing some serious damage, and the children are not well.
They're not, Keri. And I just want to say iron sharpens iron, because the work that you do out there in the policy arena, making sure that you're elevating the voices of parents and what's right for kids, regardless of the partisan affiliations, right? When you go out there, you say, this is what's right for kids. Now let's figure out how to do that in that context. So I just want to give you the shout out that you deserve and your flowers. Curtis, the real G, right? The person who's been always talking about what it takes to support our young men of color, what it takes to bring young men into the profession in terms of teaching, so that young men who are not yet teaching have somebody to look up to, somebody to aspire to. So I want to give you all a shout out. I am honored to be on your show today to talk about what it takes to do right for our kids. So that's what we wrote about, Keri. We said that there was a saying in East Africa, and it's not about how you doing, how's the family, it's how are the kids. And that is the literal greeting, with this notion that if we can be taking care of our kids, we are literally taking care of our society. And Keri, you and I have come to the conclusion of that is the question that we're asking ourselves today on 9/5/2025. The answer is not good. We are not taking care of our kids, and thus we are not taking care of our society. So that was the op-ed we put in. We need to stop what is happening in terms of waging war on the well-being of our children. And I hope that we can work together to make that happen and change it from words on a page to reality out in the field.
And I think that's so important, because again, it's about working together. And what is so heartbreaking to me from my perspective and the constituency that I represent is that we've lost sight of that. And you first mentioned like bipartisan efforts. There used to be a time in this country where we might disagree, but we didn't have to be so nasty and disagreeable about it, right? And like we are trying everything to try to refocus the attention of everyone, whether it is our teachers, our administrators, our elected officials, everyone saying, we've got to put away ego. We've got to put away partisan divides. And we've got to focus in on outcomes for kids. And it's everything. everything right now. And I'm gonna give you a little sneak peek. We are trying right now, and I think we're gonna have a little success in the Senate. In just about a week and a half, we're gonna announce that there is a bipartisan resolution about the right to read, declaring once again that there is a literacy crisis in this country, and we must address it, because I believe that it is the most transformational thing that we can do for our children, is literally just teach them how to read. It's hard, but we can do it. But we can see people, like we can see Chairman Cassidy on the right, who is a sponsor, and Chairman Reed, who is on the left and is a Democrat, as a sponsor. They're going to come together, and I believe we can have a moment. But in the day-to-day struggle of it, I mean, it's not just education. We got to push outside the bubble. It is economic issues at this point. Like, we can't even agree that we've got to feed children, that we've got to make sure they're safe.
Let's take a second on this. I mean, the child tax credit that passed during the Biden administration, and really at the end of the first Trump administration, cut child poverty in half, right? And we know that the relationship between poverty and education is already too strong. It is a correlation that wakes me up every day with frustration. And at the Urban Assembly, we've dedicated ourselves to breaking that correlation. Every young person deserves to be able to meet their potential. And when we say it's broader than education, we know the ecosystem for educating our youth matters, right? So when we see policies that make it difficult for school districts who are already strapped to make good decisions around finances, when we see policies that say, hey, we may or may not deliver already committed funding while students are already coming back to schools, like, what problem are we solving in that space? We have educators who are already buying supplies for their children out of their own pocket. We have principals who are already working late hours. And then we want to have an administration that honors these educators and honors these kids and says, whatever the policy situation is in our upcoming bill, if I promise Curtis $15, I'm gonna pay him $15, right?
Well, I gotta stop you right there, because I want to give Curtis some room here, because you know me, I can talk the balls off a pool table here. But I gotta say to you, like, let's break this down to brass tacks, because we can talk in like the generalities, but let's talk about, if I say I'm going to pay you $15, I'm going to give you $15. Like, we were thrown into chaos this summer around whether or not that money was going to come from the feds down to literally hit bank accounts, like in New York City public schools and everywhere else across this, just to pay for programs that were already promised. Kids who were waiting, kids who were literally attending schools like yours, were 70%.
That's right.
Of the kids depend on these city-funded programs that support their social emotional development. It's for all of these things that you know. Tell me what that is like on the grassroots level when you get that email or that call. Like, what does that do? Well, how does that feel for you? And what does it do in terms of reality, lived reality, when you're at the literally at the school level?
Is it Curtis or Dave one?
Well, no. It's for you, David. Let me just add something to that, because I want our listeners to understand that even right now, we are in September. There are school leaders like David and others who are preparing for next year's budget now. They are meeting with parents. They are talking about programs, and they start this process very, very early. Most places are introducing budgets, around January is when they're actually starting to debate them. Those of you who are really attuned to your local school board, it's January and February when they start having those public hearings. Charter school boards as well, and they want to talk to and listen to parents. They're going to vote on this stuff probably in March and April, so they can make commitments to Keri's point, to who we're going to hire. Do we hire an extra math teacher or a science teacher? Do we bring on a librarian? Do we bring on a gym teacher? We hire a new security guard? And so when the administration and a lot of what's happening, we're putting school leaders like David and others in this sense of uncertainty as late as July.
When kids are already in school. I mean, not in New York, but in Arizona.
Already in school. And so I just want people to I just want to put some context around that, having been on my school board for 10 years, and being surprised at how early the process goes. But the process matters, and Keri, you know this better than anybody, because if you want to have community support and buy-in and that voice and parent inclusion from different spaces, making sure that you are, this sort of equity-based decision-making that people talk about, where you can't just have the superintendent in there and PhDs with parents who don't feel as if they deserve to be in the room, even though they do. And you're wondering why people aren't being very open and transparent. You have to create an enabling environment and a welcoming environment for input. So again, David, talk a little bit about sort of, what it means to be a school leader in this environment, and what impact what you see now has had on you as a leader and on your students and staff.
Well, let me use Keri's words, brass tacks. All right, this is brass tacks. We can talk about the role of slavery in the development of our nation, and we can have a conversation about the right way to frame that. But this is not that conversation. I'm talking about after school programs so that kids are safe and that parents can go to work and have a job and pick up their kids and know that they're being supported in a supportive learning environment with caring adults. I'm talking about boys and girls clubs, YMCA programs. I'm talking about the opportunity for young people to have the kind of after school experiences that enrich their ability to contribute to their community. So I can recognize, and I know, Keri, we're in the same place. There's some things that we need to talk about in terms of how we organize and articulate our values in our society and the role that schools play in doing so. This was and is not that. So if we're going to freeze some funding arbitrarily, I can understand how an administration wants to organize funding according to the dictates of that administration, given that they're elected, popularly elected. But there are things that we need to be able to do as schools. We need to be able to protect our young people. We need to be able to say that there's a space that's after school that is safe, that parents can rely on, so that if you're working 2 jobs, so that if you're doing the thing that allows us to contribute to our community, our children are not on the streets. So the reason I am so frustrated by this kind of decision making is this is not controversial stuff. This is not values-based. Let's have a long conversation about the nature of the we and we, the people of the Constitution. This is about young people having environments that allow them to be safe, allow parents to know that there are institutions that care for them. And if we're at that level in terms of arbitrariness and capriciousness, then we have a lot of questions to ask around what we're going to be doing in the future and the role of our school systems in protecting our youth.
And David, I don't think people understand the role that schools and programs like this really have on our communities in terms of family stability. I mean, just this morning, this is day 2 of school here for us. And there was, again, no bus. And it threw the whole morning into chaos because I'm dependent. Like, I got meetings scheduled at 8:30 a.m.
I know you do, Keri.
I know you do. And I was talking to somebody in India, right? But I'm getting the panic calls, like the bus is not here. I got to stop the world and I got to figure out logistics, how to get them. Like, that is like one morning. You throw a program where mama is trying to like literally work a 9 to 5 because our school schedules like do not accommodate like parents being the backbone of the American economy, right?
Let's just start with that.
You got to do it, right? Like, even just getting down to that. And I will tell you something. When I was a union organizer working for SEIU, I was organizing a hospital and working with housekeepers. And we were trying to get them a living wage and having this conversation. I'll never forget this conversation I had with a man who said to me, I'm so proud we got this contract. We got him a little rate, maybe $2-3, right? Something that some people wouldn't even feel. But it was $2-3 to him. And it meant that he only had to work a job and a half instead of 3 jobs because he was hustling.
Yeah.
And he said, you know why I'm so happy about this? Because I'm going to be up my kid's butt now. Because he's out there running the streets and he's getting into trouble. But I got to work these jobs because I'm trying to feed him. And I really want to be like more engaged with him. But there's no program for him to go to. And now I can work less so I can figure him out. Like, that's what parents are dealing with. So if you think like it's no big deal, parents will just figure it out. These are the kind of destructive moves that really erode our communities. It erodes family structure, and you don't know the impact that you're really going to have long term and what you're doing to folks. So that's why I think it was really important, like what we were saying on this op-ed. And I want to encourage everybody. It's in the Dallas Weekly. If you go to any of our social media, you go to National Parents Union social media, we're putting that up to make sure you can read it. But it's really can we remember that these are just not, cuts made in a vacuum?
Yeah.
Like, it's to what you're saying, David. It's to the real lived experience that we're all seeing here. And we got to do something about this.
And this is why, Keri, when originally saw the situation, I thought only one person that I could reach out to could really amplify that message, and that's you. Because we're talking about investing in families. We're talking about investing in the social and emotional development of young people by having caring adults present in young people's lives. So when we talk about our social contract, we talk about the things that bind us in terms of exchanges of goods and services and values. We need to get back to the very, very, very beginning and say, young people matter. Young people's well-being matter. How do we support that through our community, through our taxes, through our government services, through our churches, through our CBOs, through our role models, through our Boy Scouts? Young people matter. Let's solve for that.
So I'm not going to let this opportunity, being on a podcast with David Adams and Curtis Valentine, pass me by without putting it out there. These two strong Black male educators, role models, leaders right now. Like, I want to have a real moment with you guys because you're the experts in this. Like, this feels like a real mess right now. And at the same time, we are trying to motivate people, but especially people of color, male people, teachers of color, to want to invest their lives in their time into fixing this and into helping our young people. Like, let's give you guys a few minutes. Like, I got to hear, like, even though it's tough, like, what's the word that you have for folks who are listening to us right now?
No, I think David kind of keyed into it, particularly, he mentioned the social contract. And for those who kind of understand, social contract between the citizens and the government and the way that we pay taxes and the laws. But I think there's also a commitment in a contract, particularly, now I'll be very transparent, between particularly men in communities and what the community expects from men. And this goes back to even you all referencing the African proverb. For those who don't know, when I finished college, I moved to South Africa and I lived in the continent off and on for about 10 years. And one thing, I would be in villages with no electricity or road, no running water. I mean, I'd be really in places that you probably couldn't find on the map. But everywhere I went, there was a commitment, particularly from the men, to do a couple of things. One, there was a commitment of protection, like physical, but also intellectual, like this protection over vulnerable groups. I'm not saying women were not strong, because in many cases, the women were probably even physically and mostly stronger than men. But the women were saying, there are things that I'm doing, and, to borrow from Bill Belichick here, just do your job, right? You do your job, I'll do mine. But there's also this expectation of vision setting and saying, you're going to exceed where we are right now. Your house will be bigger. Your bank account will be larger. You'll be able to serve more people. And right now, this is something that I struggle with a lot. Will my children do better than me and my wife, educationally, financially, and all those things? And by every measure, children in America, and this is probably the first generation of life, will actually, on average, do worse than their parents. And so this is my point that I struggle with, and I imagine you do too, David, is saying, so is that going to happen on our watch? Where my children will say, yeah, Dad, you worked hard, you got to a point, you went to school, you bought a home, all the things. But now I'm looking at a bleak future where, schools aren't funded, the supports aren't there, we're struggling, educators aren't being supported, parents are being marginalized. And what's going to happen is I'm going to be more dependent on you, Dad and Mom, than you were on Grandma and Grandpa. But you promised me, whether you said it or not, that when you brought me into this world, you were going to set me off on a path. And men, I'll just be very direct with us brothers. That was in part people looking at us saying that was partly your role. Yeah. And so that's not happening. If it's not happening, bro, I'm looking to myself. And so everything I say to you all on social media, I'm looking to myself in the morning in the mirror and saying, Curtis, what are you doing to make sure the village, and again, this is a village, whether it be in South Africa, Uganda, Harlem, or Haverford, if the village is not okay, many people are saying, what role are men playing? Because if men are okay and you give the women the freedom to operate in their excellence, we're all okay. So David, I struggle with this, brother. I don't know if you do too, but yeah, man, it's if our children are not doing as well as we are generationally, that's a commitment that we dropped the ball on.
Look, Chris, I'm super resonant with you, man. I'm taken back to Dr. Martin Luther King's last March on Selma, and he has a speech, and he talks about the psychological burden of resentment. He talks about Jim Crow, and he said, and the white Southerner cried out for food, and they fed him Jim Crow, and his child asked for sustenance, and he fed his child Jim Crow, and he pointed to the signs. Right. And I want to be clear with this, right? Resentment is not nutrition, it's not sustenance. It doesn't solve problems, right? You can point to it. You can, it's like Diet Coke, you know what I mean? It's like you can kind of taste the sugar, right? But it's not the real thing. And so as men and as people who are in society tasked with giving our children more, right? Leaving to our posterity liberty, we are tasked with solving problems, not just complaining about them. And so we are tasked with providing an education for our young people that's worthy of the greatness that's inside of them. We are tasked with delivering to our young people what our ancestors delivered to us: freedom, a sense of pride, a sense of purpose. And that is not about sitting around and feeling bad for ourselves. It's not about sitting around and dwelling in resentment. It's about getting up on our feet, policy making, supporting young people who can do the right thing, and then getting out there and giving our students, our young people, a sense of pride that they will take their place in society, that we will leave them a place in society worthy, and then we need to make that happen. So that's where I'm at with that, right? Like, the reason we're writing this op-ed is not to be like, hey, here's one more ounce of resentment against what's happening, but to call to people and say, we don't have to accept this. We don't have to live in a world that's nihilistic about what we can achieve. Right? We are a great country. We have things to do. Michael Jordan was a great player. Doesn't mean his three-point shot didn't need work, right? So I do think, Keri, we can uplift ourselves into a vision of the future that doesn't replace sustenance with resentment.
Yeah, I am. This is the reason why, David is one of my favorite human beings. Like, brilliant professionally, but literally like the heart for this work. So David, I'm so grateful that you're spending some time. We tore you away from work today to spend some time with us to lift up this conversation. And we're so grateful for your work and your leadership and your heart. And, not only the work that you're doing with New York City Public School kids and the kids in the community, but just what you're giving to the world in using your voice, because you don't have to. And it's greatly appreciated. So thank you for being with us today.
Likewise, same to you, Keri. Always a pleasure, Curtis. I appreciate your work out there, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Great to have David Adams here with us today to remind us of our obligation. Not only that our ancestors gave us a blueprint, but I'm telling people all the time, you are someone's ancestor.
That's right.
We are someone's ancestor right now, so we have to act accordingly and carry the torch. Thank you all so much. Thanks so much, David, for joining us. We'll let you get back to your school and those amazing students over at Urban Assembly.
Cheers.
Well, a lot's going on still, Keri, in Washington and around the country. And one thing that I've been sort of tapped into is that some of you all remember back in February, Trump administration announced nearly $600 million in cuts to teacher grants. And this gets back to something you mentioned earlier, Keri, like at the heartbeat of our school system are those educators who wake up every morning trying their darndest to really educate our students. And so those cuts, which at the time people didn't know, eventually we realized were cuts of programs like supporting effective teacher educator development grant programs, and teacher quality partnership programs, and teacher and school leader incentive programs that really were at the heart of ensuring that underrepresented communities were actually getting into the classroom, because the data shows that when teachers and looks like their students and students like the teachers, all the things you want to do well, grades go up, college admission, college graduation go up, attendance goes up, but also, behavior issues go down. Mm-hmm. So UCLA, which also had one of these programs, says that loss of federal funding would hinder efforts to address educational disparities and reduce, the pipeline of teachers equipped to serve in these in these programs. And so, there was a legal battle that went ahead, and there were states that really fought against this. And so now that funding is going to be coming through, right? So we're so excited about the legal battle that states really pushed to make sure this money would come through. It was going to impact rural schools. And so oftentimes people look about teacher diversity, talking about urban schools. No, there are rural schools which are really hard pressed to find and keep teachers. And so, again, similar pre-service programs. And so a lot of this stuff is the things that we looked at, we were following, but now, this legal battle that was fought against administration was in favor. Everyone's going to be coming through now.
Yeah, and let's talk about real direct impact. There was actually a partnership that I've been a part of with other leaders from across the country, working with teachers to teach them basically how to interact with parents, families, and communities through UCLA, through Arizona State University. I also want to shout out Dr. Tunette Powell, who is a brilliant genius and has been spearheading a lot of this work. And watching her go through, after devoting years of her life to helping prepare teachers to do better parent and family engagement, to teach them that, like, what we know, because we know parent and family engagement is critically important as making sure that we get to those academic outcomes that we want. She devoted her whole life to this. Watching her go through the loss of this funding, her program, her life's work, and all of us from across the country saying, are you kidding me? Like, we have all the data. We know that there's evidence that supports that these things, like, we've got to do this. It was devastating, but also inspiring, because she decided she was going to do the work without funding. And it's been a brilliant thing to watch her move, but to have to do that without funding and continuing to dedicate her work to this was just, it was crushing. So again, like, there are real things. Like, these aren't just headlines that you see in the news. There are real people, real programs doing real work that is evidence-based, that is going to lead and has led to increased academic outcomes for kids, literally for children that are suffering as a consequence of these decisions. So it's not just happening on paper and moving money on a spreadsheet. There are real kids that are impacted by this stuff.
And I'm so glad that states really fought back. You have governors, states attorneys general, who really were saying, we're not going to lay down and see these cuts go through, because as we mentioned throughout, since we've been back, parents, families, educators were coming out of their pocket. School districts were trying to compensate and sort of cut other programs in order to make sure they had, programs like this that are really getting to the heart of recruitment and support and training for teachers in really areas that need them the most. In many cases, urban centers, but also, again, rural America. So we're glad to see that legal fight was really in favor of those who complained, and that money should be coming through. Before we get out of here, one last thing we're looking at, a piece of data that came out. The Hill this week did a piece on something that we've been talking about a lot, and this is sort of enrollment in traditional public schools. And so we want to be clear that there's, we have public charter schools, which are publicly funded, accountability at the public level from the community and the school board. But we're seeing through Wilson research that from 2020 up until 2024, charter schools, public charter schools in America saw an increase of nearly 15%, nearly 500,000 students, according to some recent research. And, for that period of time, enrollment in traditional public schools fell about 5%. Over 2 million students. And so enrollment, rose across a lot of areas, both racial and ethnic lines for charter schools, with Hispanic enrollment in charter schools increasing the most over the 6 years by 23%. So, Keri, we've been talking about this. Charter schools were founded 30 some odd years ago to really work in tandem with traditional public schools around innovation and support and options and different school models. And so you're seeing parents choose those models. And so I think it's important that we have these conversations about what happens when you see this push towards public charter schools and what the positive impact could be if those school districts work together with these charter operators.
Well, I got to say, Curtis, you better not be surprised by these numbers and this growth, because I've been telling you, this is our 10th podcast. I told you parents are looking for choices worth choosing, right? And choices that have meaningful, measurable results, right? So it makes sense to me that the more availability there are of charter schools, parents are going to choose them, because that's, when there is a good, high quality option where you can actually get some guarantee that when your child emerges from this educational tactic that you have chosen, that they are going to actually be ready and prepared for the jobs and economy of the future. We know that there are so many charter schools right now that are devoted to that and are getting it done. So I'm not surprised that we're seeing the shift, because everything in our polling, in our research, and frankly in common sense says that American families want more public school options. So this is what it is. It's going to, and frankly, as we go into the fall, I think you and I are going to be talking a whole lot more about where the kids are going and what options are being chosen. Because also this week there was a poll by EdChoice that came out that said, a lot of parents are now taking a look at voucher options, and we're seeing 1.3 million people who have now exercised that particular option. To me, that's the danger zone, and the devil's in the details when we talk about private vouchers and where they go and whether or not we get to those meaningful, measurable outcomes. So I think into the fall, there's going to be a lot of financial impact on districts, because if there's not kids in seats, that's going to take a hit to the per pupil expenditure that these schools, traditional schools, are getting from their states. And that's going to mean there's going to be some compromising. And we're also going to see a lot of drama, particularly in blue states, urban centers, because the unions are not going to relent. And they are going to be fighting for increasing funding for their contracts and all of that. So the pot of money is going to shrink. The demands are getting bigger. And that means there's going to be a lot of political turmoil. So you better stay tuned to this space.
That's right. And so this is why we have this podcast. There's so much going on in politics and policy and polling that we want to be your weekly dose to make sure that you're not left out and that you be able to speak and articulate about what's happening in education, particularly as it affects your family, your school district, and this country. Keri, we're at time. It's 9:30 around the country. 9:30 on the East Coast. Folks waking up on the West Coast. And so thank you all for joining us again. Please like, share, comment, share this podcast with your group chat, your families, so that you all can tap into us every Friday for the Union Podcast. Any final words before we get out of here, Keri?
Stay tuned, because we're going to be coming at you. We're going to be doing a live edition of this podcast coming up in just a few days. It was next week, right? We're going to be in Nevada. We're going to try to make
Hey, we're hitting the road. If you want us to come to your conference, you want us to come to your town, your parent meeting, please let us know. You all know how you can contact Keri and I. We want to be where the action is, where the work is, and that's where the union happens. You see how I did that? So thank you all for joining us again. We will see you next week right here on social media live every week with the Union Podcast. I'm Curtis Valentine, Keri Rodrigues. Thank you all for joining us.